welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello and welcome to Syosset Public Library's Turn the Page podcast. I'm very happy to have author Lindsay Currie on today's podcast to discuss her upcoming book, It's Watching. It was such a great read, and I can't wait to talk to you about this today, Lindsay. So thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for hosting me. I'm excited too. This book was really fun to write, so I think we'll have a lot to chat about.
Yeah, definitely. Like what I loved about this book is I'm always drawn to children's books, especially that deal with paranormal and ghost type of things. And especially since this happens on Halloween night, like what a great background to have with
Yes.
this great.
I mean, it's the perfect night to
Yeah.
set the beginning of a scary book, right? I mean, you're already in that mindset, and even the atmosphere lends itself to that around that time of year. So I'm glad you appreciate that because I'm a Halloween girly. So
Yeah, same, definitely. Halloween's one of my favorite holidays. It always has been since I've been a kid. And I love that there's like this trio of friends and they kind of just stumble upon this paranormal event at a cemetery and they kind of have to discover all these mysteries and secrets. Like, did you have an inspiration to write this
yeah,
book?
for sure. So, as with a lot of my books, actually, because this is, definitely not my first middle grade spooky mystery or horror, I guess you could say, I tend to look for the history first. So, I'm a big fan of working actual local history into my book. So, even though the book itself is fictional, I do like having these bits and pieces, especially from Chicagoland area, that are real and that actually happened so that my readers can kind of sink their teeth into something in that paranormal space, right, that is actually real. And so the first piece of the puzzle that came together with It's Watching was actually the setting, was the graveyard. Bachelor's Grove is a real place. It's in Midlothian, Illinois.
Oh, wow.
It is one of the most unique graveyards I've ever been to. And I've been to a lot of them because they're a great place to find cool history and architecture and, people and things like that. But Bachelor's Grove is abandoned. It really, no one has been buried there since the 1980s.
Mm.
It's in very, very bad shape. It's been vandalized over the years. So there are, I believe, 110 or 112 people buried there, but there's really only 20 some headstones remaining. And the first time I saw it, there was just this element of spookiness, yes. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the graveyard, the other thing that makes it unique in a minute, but also kind of, it was a little sad to me. I'm thinking about all of those people buried there. And this is supposed to be a final resting place and somewhere that family can come visit, but there's no evidence of these people at all. And that just struck me as wrong. So that was one thing I kind of wanted to shine a light on, first of all. And then the other element of Bachelor's Grove that's really unique is that it's not very easily accessible. It's actually in the middle of a forest preserve.
Wow.
Um, so to get into the graveyard, you're actually hiking through timber for a quarter, half mile to reach it, which gives it a very isolated, eerie feeling.
Right. I feel like a lot of people would be drawn to go there. Like anyone like kind of like
Yeah.
a ghost paranormal walk, like definitely like around Halloween time. Like it definitely seems like the place. But that's very sad, like you said, that none of the stones we really know, who they belong to, like where if the who's buried there. Because there's a family you mention in the book that plays a central role, like one of their grave markers or like their area in the graveyard is there. Like they have a family plot kind of. And I was going to ask you if that family was a real historic like family that was known.
Yeah. So everyone referenced in the book was a real person. And again, it's not necessarily something I do with every single book. Sometimes pieces of the history are real, and then I will fictionalize names, or it will just be inspired by someone in particular. But I actually did a lot of genealogy research for this book, both just on my own and with the Tinley Park Historical Society. They're amazing there, incidentally. I wrote them into my author's note for a reason. They were so helpful and so kind during this process. But I did want to include actual families that have connections to Bachelor's Grove. And so, yes, all of that you're reading is real. And in fact, on the inside, for those of you listening, on the inside cover of It's Watching, there is a custom map that was drawn
Yes.
for this book.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and
It was
all
so
of that is
detailed.
real. Yeah, it is. And
How
all of that
detailed it
is
was and so
real.
interesting. Yeah, because sometimes they have those in the beginning of books and they're just, it's made up for the story. And like, so that's very interesting that that's all real because it's for me, it's always so interesting, even more so reading about like inspired real events. Like I find that even like
Yeah.
cooler in a lot of ways because these were like actually based on real people. And then like when you have an inspired story, it has conversations and then people go to research it. And like because now I want to research about Bachelor's Grove more and
Yeah.
see about that area. Like it
Good. I
really
mean,
is
that's the
very
goal.
interesting.
I mean, that really is the goal. Like when I include things like this, and I've been very, very lucky to work with an amazing editor at De La Court, and the entire team that worked on this book was just phenomenal because when I said I really want to have some front matter and back matter to this book, front matter being the map, for example, and the back matter in this book are actual photos of graves in Bachelor's Grove. So I don't know if you saw those black and whites at the end, but those really for me accomplish two things. I mean, so for one, the reader has an opportunity to kind of research along with my characters, right? When my characters are running around in this graveyard or looking at something in particular or navigating around these graves, readers can look at that map and visualize where they are. You can also use the photos at the end to visualize what these things actually look like in real life. And that also adds this other layer, for me anyway, of being more spooky, right? I
Oh,
mean, sometimes I feel like
definitely.
when you add that actual history in, it gets scarier.
Oh, definitely for me. Like anytime there's a book or a movie that says that this is inspired by true events, that just adds a whole nother layer or factor. And it makes it pretty cool because
Yes.
it's
You're like,
cool to
what?
I'm interested in like paranormal types of things and like it's for me it's like not so scary. It's just kind of like the unknown and it's fun to research about and like learn about people. I always find that like it's so interesting. I think anyone reading or watching something about like a paranormal story or event, like these are real people that were involved and like for better or worse, they had things happen to them. So we want to know, like, we want to find the answers to things. Like that kind of is segueing into my question. Like, how do you think readers, like, why are we drawn to ghost stories and why are they always so like relevant in our lives?
Well, I mean, I think ghost stories do a few things, and you make a good point. They stay kind of classic, right? Like, I mean, ghost stories are they never really feel like they're, falling out of trend in any way. And I think a big part of that is because, at the heart of a ghost story is a story about loss in some
Yes.
way, grief, maybe processing grief. And this is something that young readers experience, right? And so I think it's important to address these things in books. And also, the idea of ghosts is just scary, right? I mean, for a lot of us or a lot of young readers that are probably grappling with their ideas about the afterlife, right? What does happen? Do ghosts exist? What happens to people when they die? So you really cannot have a ghost story without also simultaneously addressing loss and grief and sadness. And I think we see a lot of that through the character of Jackson in this book, because Jackson is yes, he's helping with this investigation. And yes, he's part of all of this, but he is also personally going through a loss as well, which makes this a very different experience for him than it is for the other two.
Yes, definitely. I noticed that with the characters too, especially with Jackson. And I think his friends are kind of definitely everyone has their own strengths, right? And like, I love a trio setup because it's like always one person adding, you know, their help because they're trying to research what's going on. And like, I love how you included like the kind of sense like almost like a ghost can follow you because that doesn't happen in every stories, but they definitely start to experience like paranormal activity events happening at home. So I thought that that was pretty cool.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I feel like in order for a book like this one with this kind of setting to work, where, it's not really a house that's haunted per se, but it's really a person who is experiencing this or a group of people, in order for me to create that kind of trapped feeling and the urgency for them to actually resolve this, I can't let it be a situation where, okay, well, there's a ghost in Bachelor's Grove, but it stays in Bachelor's
Right.
Grove. So we're fine as long as we're not there. I have to make sure that they are influenced by this negative thing, this force, this problematic thing, no matter where they go. So I think that's why you see things amping up and really intensifying throughout the book. Wherever they go, it is, unsettling, right? They're starting to experience unexplainable things, not just at the graveyard, but in the house. And later when they're doing research and they're in a museum, things are happening to them there as well. So it's following them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And now does that actual, because I'm looking on the map, does that actual farmhouse, the house exists that's in the graveyard that's mentioned in the book? Was that a real?
So yeah, so a lot of the things that are mentioned in the book, including the farmhouse, were things that I guess at this point you would almost, have to call them hearsay because it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what was there
Mhm.
at that time. But the letter referenced in the book, I mean the journal entry, I guess I should say, that's real, and that does cite a farmhouse in that location. And it's possible that that's, really the origins of the vanishing farmhouse story, which is really very popular in that area. That's one of the legends, that's one of the most popular. And for those of you who haven't heard that, the vanishing farmhouse legend in Bachelor's Grove is that many people over time have been in Bachelor's Grove Cemetery or near it and have seen what looks like a farmhouse in the distance. It's very welcoming. They feel like they want to go see it. And as they draw closer, the closer they get to it, the further away the farmhouse seems to move. So that as they continue to follow it into the woods, deeper into the woods, it will eventually vanish. And suddenly they realize they don't know where they are, that
Wow.
they're lost, which is kind of spooky.
That
Yeah.
is
And I
very
love that
spooky.
idea.
Yeah, I love that. And then I wonder if that's a like in other areas, if that's like I haven't heard of that kind of paranormal event where you see like a physical building and then it's not there. So that's really
Yeah.
cool. It's usually like a person. I know in the book there's like a shadowy figure, one of the prominent like family members, of that grave site that is. So that's more commonly what I've heard, but that's so cool. I've never heard of like a vanishing building being, so that's another paranormal instance that I haven't. And I've heard about like
Yeah, I know. And I
yeah.
love the idea.
Yeah, like I've
Yeah,
heard of
it's
like
well, it's so
yeah,
fun to think about, like, it like being super misleading too, right?
definitely. Yeah.
Like this is, supposedly like it's really drawing you towards it, like making you feel like it is safe and warm and inviting, but the closer you get to it, the further it just seems to drift away, until it vanishes entirely and you are left in this kind of cold, dark forest, not
Right.
knowing where you are.
Right. It's so interesting the name too, Bachelor's Grove, like how that came about. Like always wonder about like names of things. Like
Yeah. No, and I don't think that was actually its original name. Like I think it
right.
had a couple of different names, and I think one of them was a variation of the word bachelors, like batchelders or
Okay.
batchelders or something along those lines. It could have been the last name of a family. I mean, a lot of graveyards start with a family or a couple of families, right? So I'm almost positive that this is just a variation of the original name.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then the oldest section is in 1832. So I think that that's like how we can kind of determine the age somewhere in like the 1830s that this was named
Yeah.
the art area.
Yeah. And there have definitely been, I actually reference a website called The Path to Bachelor's Grove in my author's note because it really did provide a lot of information about this graveyard. There are people who have done an intense amount of research into the history of it, its origins, its kind of changing nature over the years, and it falling into ruins as well, which is really, really sad. If you ever have a Bachelor's Grove, it's it's quite small. I mean, I don't think it can be very much more than somewhere between an acre or two. But the impact of seeing it, when you walk through these very remote woods and then suddenly it opens to this graveyard that is very small and sadly today quite shabby looking, is just something that you don't see very often. And that was one of the very first things that struck me and made me want to write this book, was just to kind of share this history like I do in a lot of my books. Like there are things around the Chicagoland area that impacted the area, that, made a difference in the people or the culture or whatever it is. And frequently these things are either told incorrectly or not talked about at all anymore. And Bachelor's Grove is just too unique and too special to not have a little bit of a spotlight shined on it.
Yeah, I love how you chose like also a location that's not so known to people. Like it's
Yeah.
not like it's like, Gettysburg battlefield, like, where I've seen
Hmm.
like a lot of books about really well-known places. It's so cool, like how you made it so interesting about a place and its history. Like you really brought it alive. It's very visual story, like of what we see. Like, and I think for horror and ghost stories, it's very important because visually that's a lot of like what the characters are experiencing and feeling to make things like feel very present and real. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad I succeeded in that area because that was definitely a goal.
yeah. And like how they're figuring out like the different, like you put in the journal entry and different things. Like I love how they're like solving this mystery, but you don't give too much away in the beginning. Like, is that kind of your style, like in your other book too? I know you've written another middle grade book, Scritch Scratch, which I really would like to read too. Is
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I think, let me see, I'm actually looking at my bookshelf right now. So we have Scritch Scratch, which is one that you just referenced, Peculiar Incident on Shady Street, What Lives in the Woods, and It Found Us. Those are some of my other titles that I would say include solid Chicagoland history and a mystery that unfolds in kind of a similar way in the sense that yes, I'm going to give, the reader bits and pieces and some clues here and there and things that they can start perhaps researching or just kind of like ruminating on along with the characters. But the goal is to kind of keep them along for the ride. So that's always a tricky part of my books, to be honest, is figuring out what those clues are and where to put them and I want to make sure to keep readers engaged, right? I want them to have a chance to figure some things out along with my characters, but not figure everything out and certainly not super fast. I would,
yeah.
have to figure out where to put these things. So, Scritch Scratch definitely unfolds in a similar manner, although Scritch Scratch does not feature one location. So that one's a little bit different in the sense that that follows a ghost tour bus around Chicago to all of the most haunted locations. So it's very difficult for the main characters in that book to pinpoint where this ghost even came from. Unlike in It's Watching, where it's pretty obvious that this ghost originated in Bachelor's Grove. There is something going on. They stirred up something when they went there on Halloween night.
Yeah, it's so cool. I can't wait to read that. That sounds so cool. A ghost bus and they're going to different locations. That just sounds like I'm so glad I discovered your books because I'm like, I have so much reading to do now.
Oh,
I'm sure
thank
other
you.
people
I
do
love
too.
that.
Yeah, because I really feel like that's like a niche. I haven't read a lot of other middle grade books that have horror, ghost, paranormal elements that also have an historic background to them. So I think that that's so cool.
Yeah. It's definitely kind of a niche for me. And it really originated this way because oddly, when I was a kid, I really didn't like history. Like it was a subject I didn't enjoy in school. And I think it's because I had a very narrow idea of what history was back then, right? I mean, to me, it was only what I was being taught in school. And this was a lot of memorization. It was wars. It was stuff that really kind of made my eyes glaze over. I didn't really realize until I started researching and kind of like following my own curiosity around Chicagoland that history can be so much more than that. It can be your local history. It can be forgotten history. It can be history that's told wrong or twisted or warped over the years. These oral stories that we hand down, how they're changed. And I kind of liken it to that old game we used to play when I was a kid, telephone, where you would have one person say
Exactly.
something and then you pass it all the way down the line. And at the end, it never is anything remotely
Right.
like what that first person, right? Sometimes it's accidental. People mishear things, but sometimes it's because it's funny or interesting to change the words, right? That's kind of how history is in a lot of cases. And it's very interesting to me to get to the heart of what is the truth? How did we get here where we are? But how can we also and I think there was a review for It's Watching that said it best. I think it might have been either School Library Journal or Publishers Weekly said that one thing they walked away with It's Watching was this notion that to remember the past is to honor it.
Right.
And that's really a huge part of why I write the type of books I do.
Yeah, no, I really respect that because you can obviously tell you've done a ton of research and there's so much going into this. Like just like creating a book itself, like the process of that probably takes a really long time. And then to have to research, that's another added element. So I really applaud you for that. Like and
Thank
respecting
you.
like the place, too, and creating a story about someplace that people don't really know about all that much, like definitely outside the Chicago area. So
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
yeah, it was so much fun to read. I can't wait to hear about like what you might be writing next. Do you have another title you could share a little bit about?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. So in the spooky department, because I do write two different kinds of mysteries, I have my spooky mysteries like It's Watching and Scritch Scratch that we talked about, and then I have adventure mysteries too, which are very fun escape room type mysteries, but don't have any paranormal or spooky elements. So in October, I've got the sequel to a book called The Mystery of Locked Rooms coming out. That's an escape room themed adventure story. And the series is called The Delta Game. So that book comes out in October and it's called The House with No Keys. But after that, for folks listening who read one of my spooky stories, let's say It's Watching, and if you really like that, the book that I would recommend you have on your radar is coming out in February of 2026. It is called X Marks the Haunt. And I think it genuinely might be one of my favorite things I have ever written. It takes place largely in Graceland Cemetery,
Oh,
and it features a main character whose mother is the executive director of the graveyard. And I had an opportunity, thanks to the folks at actual Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, to shadow with them for a summer, so that I could see the inner workings of this massive, historic, incredible graveyard, and arboretum, because it's both at this point. And, the death industry is one that's not to sound dramatic, but it is really shrouded in mystery. Most of us don't understand what people who work in a graveyard do.
exactly. Right.
Um, yeah, and I think young readers in particular, if you were to ask them, what does a director in a graveyard do? They would probably suggest dig graves, which, you know, they could do, but that's really not the majority of what they do. The majority of what they do is a lot of genealogy, a lot of research, a lot of helping people track down loved ones and figuring out puzzles of people's history. And it's fascinating. So that book, X Marks the Haunt, is coming out February of 2026. And I have seen a rough sketch of the cover, which is wildly cool and so scary. And I cannot wait for that book to hit shelves. It really is a very special book.
That sounds like so much fun. I can't wait to read that. So interesting. Oh, I'm so glad we got to talk about your books because it's just the more I talk about them with you, I'm just like, there's so many, and my friends love these kinds of books too. So it's like I have a
Oh,
great
good. Well,
discuss.
you have the in now.
Yeah, and even talking about covers, this was a really cool cover for It's Watching. Like I love how it almost looks like they're all illuminated in the graveyard and all the graves are around them. And it's almost like someone's watching them, almost like it reminds me from like almost like it's all illuminated and they can see, but then someone else who's watching might not be able to. Like they almost have like an extra sense, like an extra light.
Yeah,
That was so,
it's
so
really
cool.
cool. I
Yeah.
like this cover a lot. Actually, this is a really talented illustrator. His name is Matt Saunders, and he has done a couple of my other covers in the past. What Lives in the Woods is one that he did in the past that I really liked as well. But the thing I love about the cover of It's Watching is how he so cleverly arranged all of these in the shape of an eye. And here's like the center of it. So they're, really at the heart of like
Yes, it does look, yep,
being
that's exactly.
watched by somebody, and like literally and figuratively. So very, very cool and clever illustration.
Yeah, I just love everything about this book, and I can't wait to talk to patrons of the library about it because we have a lot of spooky readers. So there's definitely a lot of kids coming in for spooky and books that
Good.
and like
Good.
also
Well,
just even
direct them.
mysteries and history too. Like there's so many, it's not just if you like spooky books, there's so much to delve into here that
Yep.
kids and
And I
adults
hope
enjoy.
I hope that's what you see, your patrons doing as well, is being inspired, not just, I mean, obviously one of my main goals is, to frighten, obviously, like No, I definitely want to have a pretty high scare factor in my books. For those who are listening, though, just so you know, none of my books feature any gore or any blood. That's not the kind of horror that I write into my books. It's more, as you know now, after reading this, classic scares
Oh,
and,
definitely.
bumps at night type thing. But the other element besides just kind of, wanting to have that scare factor is I really do love the idea of people who read my books being interested and then wanting to do their own research into that history and into that area. And actually, a few weeks ago, I guess it was a couple months ago, actually, at this point, I had a person reach out to me over email whose daughter is a fan of my books. And rather than going on a traditional summer vacation last summer, they took a week and they went to all of the haunted locations from my books.
Well, that's
And
awesome.
explored all of them in person. Yeah, and took
So cool,
pictures of
though.
my mind was blown by this. Like, this is just absolutely amazing. But that's what's exciting to kind of be able to inspire in other people is just an interest in it, right? An interest in that history. And so even though they went way above and beyond, even if, readers finish its watching and then really examine those photos in the back or do a little digging around online about Bachelor's Grove, even if they don't ever get there in person, that's still a really great start.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great that kids learn about different places and adults and that you would want to be inspired to travel there. I mean, that's what's wonderful about history and why we have it. And like, that reviewer said we have to like, learn from history, and experience things. And I think you've definitely proven your books that that's amazing. And like we should, appreciate history and learn from it. And then we take this journey with characters too. And I love how your characters were drawn and that they have flaws. There's, they have issues and things going on in their life, and readers really resonate with that. Not all of life sometimes is all happy, and, we have different struggles and different things that happen, but we can connect with these characters, and that's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's super important to me in my books to show realistic characters in this age range. I mean, in any age range, it is not realistic to have a character that never makes any mistakes. We need to see those flaws. We need to see them grappling with their own issues, because we all are. And a very common theme at the end of my books is that my characters probably are not going to get exactly what they thought they wanted at the beginning of the book. Whatever their goal was, you know, they may get some variation of it, but they're probably not going to get that exact thing because, like you point out, life just isn't perfect. And that's not a very fair reading. And I don't like the message that sends to young readers either, because sometimes we can try our very best and our very hardest and still not quite get what we want, and that's just life.
Right. That is life, but it's good like when we have friends and supportive friends like there are in the story that are kind of like solving this mystery together, but they're also a support system. I think that that's an important lesson to teach kids and adults alike,
Yes,
reach out to others around you and,
absolutely.
times, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things I love the most about the kids in this book is that when things are not going well, it is very easy for people to start picking on each other and start fighting, right? But the kids in this book, despite the fact that, yeah, of course, they kind of get on each other's nerves now and again, but they really do support each other. And they lift each other up when they need to, as opposed to falling pattern of tearing each other down when things get bad. And I love that message.
Yes, yes. No, it's such all important messages and things in this book. And it's going to be great that this book is coming out very soon. When is the official release date?
It's actually out. It's been out
out
since the
now.
beginning
Oh,
of
great.
February.
Oh, so the beginning of February. So definitely
Yep.
everyone listening, like you want to grab a copy of this and read this story because it's awesome, and definitely read other books by Lindsay Currie. It's just amazing what you write, and I really appreciate
Aw,
what you do. Great.
thank you so much. And thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you. And we're going to close this chapter on Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.